Back with my man Stuckey. You can find him on the Action Network podcast. You can find him on Big Bets on Campus. You can find him on Twitter, tweeting up a storm, probably saying goodbye to Will Levis as he's no longer ever going to play for Kentucky again. Don't blame him, though. And me making the right decision. I don't know. I have to. You got any updates on Kentucky hoops? How are they looking?
They're looking okay. I mean, they have a ton of talent as much as anybody. They're kind of falling behind in as far as like coaching and just they don't run much. Like they just Calipari's an amazing recruiter, media guy, but like as far as in-game adjustments and like the modernizing what they do, they're kind of falling behind in that department. So we'll see how they're a long way to go until March, and we'll see. Hopefully they can avoid getting upset in the first round of St. Peter's again.
Okay, well, we got some football, and actually we got some, these next couple of weeks, we're really going to determine who's in the playoffs, who's not in the playoffs.
Yep.
Let's start with, I was with you last week on Kansas City, and you got to give the Bengals credit. I mean, the Bengals are just pretty good. I mean, if that quarterback's going to be that good, they have every bit of the chance to play with Buffalo and Kansas City, right?
Yep.
In the playoffs. I mean, that guy, obviously they probably have to go on the road depending on how this next 3 or 4 weeks shape out. But like, I'm not going to hate them whether they play. I guess they would more than likely probably play Kansas City in the second round, right, as the 2-3 game. And clearly they are not going to be intimidated to go in there and have a chance to win.
Yeah, no, you have to give. Look, I mean, there was a Kelsey fumble. The Chiefs are up 4. I don't know what Reed was doing kicking that field goal, because even if you make it, like Burrow has the ball with 3 minutes to go to get on the field and get another field goal. But you can look back earlier in that game. Tyler Boyd drops a wide open touchdown that Burrow
hit him in the face mask.
Yeah. End of the first half, they went for it on 4th down. So, yeah, I think that the Bengals were the right side in that game. The Chiefs could have won. Yeah, they're dangerous. Their defensive coordinator makes really good adjustments in the second half. They consistently shut down teams in the second half. And then Burrow, with all of his weapons, like he's taken a big step forward in year 2. People don't realize it because he made the Super Bowl last year. But they weren't that great. Like, and if you look at their like yards per drive, they were like 13th, 14th in the league, and they just kind of got in late, and then they got a couple breaks and then got to the Super Bowl. But this year, if you look, like they're like 3rd in the league in yards per drive, and he's really taken a big step forward. I think the offensive line is only going to continue to improve. So yeah, they're as dangerous as anybody in the AFC.
Yeah, I mean, when Jamar Chase is out there with them, they feel like they are a juggernaut, and they clearly are. I mean, now I'm going to say what I said last week. I do like Kansas City to bounce back, but I hadn't seen the number till you sent over the email. It is a pretty large number. Shows you how much Denver sucks. At Denver to be getting 10 points. Their defense is good. I mean, Russell sucks. He's god-awful. But their defense is legitimate. And, Kansas City is just, not consistently some offensive juggernaut. Even though last week, right, they just didn't score touchdowns, but they efficiently moved the ball. And like you said, with the Kelsey touchdown, it's weird. Defensive guys don't usually tap out, right? Like Denver's defense has been playing hard pretty much consistently all season long, despite Russell Wilson being in their head coach being a joke. So you would think they're going to play hard, especially at home. The crowd, I mean, I would imagine the fans might be tapping out a little bit, but 10 points feels like a pretty large number, even for Russell Wilson, who can't, throw a touchdown to save his life.
Yeah, I reluctantly took the Broncos here. This is only the second time I've taken them, but you're right. The defense is still fighting. They might end up leading the league in points allowed, and then also lead the league with fewest points scored on offense. But they've only lost one game by 10 or more points the whole year. I mean, they just went to Baltimore. I know Lamar got hurt, but they lost by 1 in inexplicable fashion. They've lost 3 games in overtime. They've lost 5 games in which they've led in the fourth quarter. Their defense keeps them in every single game. And if there's a couple bounces, or if their offense was just a tad bit more competent, this team could have 8 or 9 wins. It's insane. And their defense, I don't know when their defense is going to just collapse from, every week trying to go out there and get them a win. But this isn't the spot. I mean, they're at home against Kansas City. The crowd will be into it. So, yeah, I think their defense shows up again. And every Broncos game is the same. It's a script. I feel bad for Broncos fans. You come home, it's Sunday, and you basically popping in a tape. It's a movie. It's the same thing every week. It's like you lose 16, 13, 13, 10, 10, 9 in just hard fashion. So, yeah, I think their defense can keep them in it. Mahomes 7-0 straight up as a favorite of 7 or more points on the road. He's also never lost on the road in division, which is crazy. But he's only 1-6 against the spread in those games. And if you want to fade Mahomes, it's when he's a favorite of 7 or more. Their defense isn't great, and which is hard for them to build margin. And one of the things that Kubiak, their new play caller, has done, it hasn't translated into points, but they have so many injuries at receiver. They've gone really heavy. So they're using like 3 tight ends. And they're just going to like this power running game. It's given them, Russell isn't getting hit as much, and it's given them a lot more manageable third downs. I think that can translate here against Kansas City, whose defensive line is not good against the run. So I think that they can move the ball some, and this is it's a big number for a road divisional game. So yeah, it's awful. It's going to be painful to watch, but give me Denver plus 9.5, 10 at home.
You know what's crazy thinking about it is like when you have an elite defense relative to like that season of other teams, you should be a borderline lock for like 10 wins, right? Yep. The Niners offense, I mean, they're going through 3 quarterbacks. They're going to win 11 games mainly because their defense dominates every week and their offense has its moments, but it is by no means a juggernaut. You're a Ravens guy. For a lot of years, you guys had inept offenses like when I was younger and we were younger, right, in the 2000s. But their defense gets you around 9 to 11 wins. Somehow the fucking the Broncos are going to win like 4 games because their offense has been that hideous. Like it's hard to be as shitty as they've been, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens won a Super Bowl with a shitty offense in 2000. I mean, they went a couple games without scoring a touchdown. And, yeah, your offense has to be extremely bad, and this is the Broncos. They're averaging 13.8 points per game. The last team to finish with under 14 points per game was the 2012 Chiefs. So yeah, you got to be like historically bad offense to not at least get in the playoffs with this great of a defense. They're in the game every week, and then it just falls apart.
Well, speaking of, if you could combine Denver's defense and Detroit's offense, I mean, you'd probably have a 16-1 team. They played Minnesota, and I honestly had to double look at this line because I get Detroit's at home, but they're the favorite in this game. Now I understand they've been playing really good football, and they easily could have won that Thanksgiving game. And you've been hammering home these stats on Minnesota, which the stats don't equal, like the record and the stats, don't exactly parallel each other. But I mean, the point of the whole sport is to win games. And I do believe, like when you watch Minnesota, it's crazy how good Justin Jefferson is. Like even when they miss him, like it's stupid how good the guy is. I love the backup running back Madison. I mean, they are pretty offensively loaded. Defensively, though, obviously Detroit is just. I mean, Jared Goff's having a pretty good season. And they kind of believe, and having the Rams pick in a weird way for a team that's not going to make the playoffs, it incentivizes them to keep trying to kick ass and take names. I mean, they got that pick coming to them. So like whether their pick ends up 12 or 17, like they are trying to win these games. I like Detroit in this game. I don't know why. I mean, I bet against Minnesota all the time, and I lose, but it does feel like I'm gonna ride Campbell and the Lions.
Yeah, I like the Lions here too. I'm not sure how much longer the Vikings can keep this up, but they're 10-2 with a +10 net scoring margin. Like that is insane. This is more like a 5 or 6 win team. They've won their last 9 games have all come by 1 possession. They're generally getting outscored in every game by a lot. I mean, they're getting lucky in turnovers, red zone. Last week they were outgained by the Jets by almost 200 yards of total offense against the Jets. They're 31st in the league in net yards per play. And if you look at a lot of metrics like power ratings, this team is like below average overall. Their defense isn't great. The Lions are rolling, and the Lions, their offense is clicking on all cylinders. They're healthy now. It's one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And you said it, Goff's playing really well. You got your receivers healthy now. Even add Jameson Williams in the mix, and you're going against a defense that can't really stop anybody. We just watched Mike White throw all over them. And then the week before, we said, oh, look, Mac Jones, this Patriots offense, maybe it's back after the bot. Well, then they looked awful against the Bills. Granted, the Bills are a pretty good day, but the Vikings defense is really bad. And the Lions defense is actually they're still bad, but they're actually improving a bit. If you look over the last 3 or 4 weeks, since the bye week, some of their young players have really started to improve. Hutchinson's really coming to his own. Akuda's starting to play better.
That guy's a monster.
Yeah, so they're this kid Pascal they're playing, and Joseph at safety. They got a lot of younger kids that are stepping up. Rodriguez at linebacker. That this defense in 2 years, if they just hit on their next couple of additions, whether it's free agency or draft picks, it could be really good to go along with this offense. The Lions are up and coming. They've covered 5 straight. I think they make it 6 and they win this game and keep their slim playoff hopes alive.
Well, I don't think it's outrageous that if they just go, we don't love one of these quarterbacks, even though it feels like Dan Campbell's going to like Will Levis, this big, powerful guy. I could see that. But if they just, if for whatever reason they don't, they could go easily with a Will Anderson or that Georgia defensive lineman and then take another sweet, player. They got Jameson Williams, who's basically going to redshirt this season. I know he came back, but I don't think he's going to play much. Yeah. They'll be cautious with him. Their team on paper could be pretty impressive. We know how their offensive line's good. Their running game's good. Yeah, Jameson Williams to go with St. Brown. If Hutchinson becomes kind of like a poor man's Bosa, not Nick, but more Joey, I think they got a chance to be just a playoff level roster for sure. Now, can they coach? Right, that's going to be the question. The more and more tight games he's in, because when they've won, they've kind of been up. The tight games have kind of gone not their way with some of his clock management and stuff. But next year, I think there's going to be some pressure on them because I think their roster is going to look pretty good on paper headed into the 2023 season.
Yeah, I agree. And if defense to, obviously your most important positions in the NFL, it's they have their offensive line covered, but it's quarterback, and Goff has shown that he's competent enough. Wide receiver which they're set at, and then on defense, it's okay, do you have a dominant defensive end, which they might with Hutchinson, and then do you have a really good corner? Which now that, Okuda's starting to play really well. And people forget he was the number 3 overall pick in the NFL draft.
Yeah.
Was really poor at first, which you see with rookies. Then he got hurt. He's starting to come into his own. So if he continues to develop, and then you got these other young pieces around them. Yeah, the Lions might actually be respectable coming up here in the next couple of years.
Okay, I don't plan on watching a second of this game, but I know you're picking a side. So sell us on Jacksonville, Tennessee.
Tennessee is just so banged up. I don't think Burks is going to play, which means they can't throw it downfield. Jags have no secondary. Their pass D is horrendous, but their run D is pretty good. Schematically, that's their defense is set up to shut down the run. Todd Bowles, disciple, coaching up that D. And then if you look at the Titans defense, it is decimated. Danico Autry is out. Landry's already out. David Long, their linebacker. They have 3 starting secondary guys that are out. And you saw that last week against the Eagles. They got a couple more guys got hurt and they couldn't stop anybody. You had Trey Avery, a couple rookies on the outside trying to guard their receivers. So I just think Tennessee is really banged up here, and their offense without Burks against a decent run D, it's going to be hard to build margin. This was trending towards 3, ticked back up because the reports came out that Lawrence didn't practice, but I think he's going to be fine to play.
I thought this week would be the time when we just kind of start ending the Giants, but that tie game kind of keeps them alive. So even if they lose this game, the next week is really the big game because they wouldn't go in with back-to-back losses against Washington. But the Giants kind of are what they are. And one thing you saw against Tennessee, some certain quarterbacks and wide receivers just have perfect chemistry, and clearly AJ and Jalen. We know it's been well documented. They've been friends for a long time, but holy shit. It's just those two guys. And honestly, Devontae Smith, obviously with Jalen, Alabama, those two guys are on the same page. That's just a pretty potent combination. It's in New York. You'd know better than me. They don't have to win this game. They're still alive. Seattle, right, and Commanders are kind of fighting for those last couple spots, but I don't know. Is Philly ripe for an upset here? A little letdown game? You would probably say no, because these divisional games, especially in the NFC East, now that everyone's pretty competitive, you take pretty seriously. 7 points feels like a lot because the Giants, throughout the season have been able to ugly up the game. But it's hard, man, for me to bet against the way Philly, like when they're on, this isn't a fair fight. It's just maybe Philly, plays their C+ game and the game's a little uglier. And maybe we're talking 13-13, midway through the, third quarter, and they got a chance to, cover, and the final score ends up, let's say 16-23 or something. And if you take the Giants +7, you're in good shape.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the Giants they're a well-coached team. They're able to ugly up these games, catching 7 at home in a divisional game in December with a team that's, alive. They'll always catch my attention. I mean, if you blindly bet home dogs of 7 or more in December or later in the history, well, not in the history, but since 1990, you're at 56%. So you're already ahead of the curve. The Eagles, there's something about the Eagles. I don't know if it's because they're young, but this team just hasn't been the same on the road. I mean, they are destroying teams at home, but on the road, for what it's worth, since 2020, they're 7-16 against the spread. That's the least profitable team in the NFL. That includes 1-6 against the spread against the NFC East. This year, it's like, they beat the Lions by 3 to start the year. Now, granted, they were up by a lot, but the Lions weren't the same team. They beat the Cardinals only by 3. They beat the Texans by 12 and 29-17. The Texans were in that game. They beat the Colts by 1 the other week. So it's the offense, and for whatever reason, they haven't been the same team on the road this year. And if it's more of it, I'm just selling high. It's like, this team has 1 loss. Last week, they go out and they absolutely dominate Tennessee. And that's why I think we're getting the 7 here. I don't think we would have gotten the 7, which is obviously a really important number. And so I'm taking it. Giants can ugly up games. It's a huge game for them. And to kind of hammer home the point of selling high on teams in the NFL in December or later over the past 20 years, teams with a 90% plus win percentage are 25, 53, and 1 against the spread. That's 32%. When those teams play away from home, they're 8, 32, and 1 against the spread. That's 20%. It goes back to, it's very rare for teams to win over 90% of their games in the NFL come December, but everyone wants to bet them, right? Who wants to fade them? So usually they're a little inflated, which is why I think you're getting a 7 here, which I'll take and hold my nose.
Well, Stuckey, some good insight. Have a good weekend, win some money, and tell Will Levis goodbye.
Absolutely. Good luck.